So, have you ever felt that you weren't qualified to share your faith with somebody else? That this would be something that you could do if you were a holier person or a more knowledgeable person? Can you think of every reason in the book why you shouldn't be the one to communicate God's message to the world? I think if you felt that way, you would find a friend with the woman we meet, the gospel reading we read this last Sunday from John's gospel, and Jesus encounters a woman at a well in Samaria. She's a Samaritan woman, and the gospel gives us a lot of cool details about this woman. One, she's a Samaritan. These are people who were hated by the Jewish people at the time, and were kind of considered outcasts for that reason. She is a woman, encountering Jesus, which might not seem like a big deal to us, but this was at a time when men and women did not meet alone. There was a complete division of the sexes that was practiced at the time. It tells you that she was collecting her water at noon, and that's interesting because it shows you that when everyone else was gathering their water in the morning when it was cooler, she was not welcome among the rest of the community. They had kind of shunned her. And most interesting, what comes out in her conversation with Jesus is that she is somebody who had been married 5 times, and either divorced or had been widowed 5 times, which probably didn't help her reputation. And at the time that she meets Jesus, she is living with somebody who's not her husband. And you would think that when Jesus meets her, that she would be disqualified for any one of these things. But it's interesting that Jesus takes the opportunity to meet the woman, and he gives her one of his most profound teachings on receiving living water, kind of a symbol of the Holy Spirit. And he gives her this teaching, and her response to meeting Jesus is, it says in the gospel that she left her water jug behind, which is her livelihood, and it's all the water she's going to use for cooking, drinking, cleaning, everything. And she goes back to her town where she had been ostracized, where she had been cast aside. And she tells them, come meet somebody that has told me everything that I have ever done. Could he be the Messiah? And her story is interesting because, like I said, she could be disqualified for any number of reasons. But it's like us, when we can look at our life story and our history, and we could see ourselves as not measuring up or having failed. We could look back at our past sins or our current hardships or our disability or our financial situation or whatever it is, and we could just look at ourselves and say, yeah, God, I don't think you could use me. But I think it's interesting that that Jesus met the woman at the well at each of the places where she had been disqualified, and uses it as a place of encounter, and says that your place of hardship, your place of sin, your place of weakness, that is often the place where you meet God. And I think if you were to think of your own life story, think of your hard times, the things that you've struggled with, could you say that you have met God in those situations? And I think if we were honest with ourselves, the answer would be yes. And I think our challenge is to start to rethink our lives, rethink our history, rethink our story, and to look back on those times in our lives where we weren't doing so good, and we failed, we were sinful, and then rethink those times and ask ourselves, well, did I meet God there? Did it bring me to more prayer? Did it bring me to did I experience some kind of enlightenment or salvation or help from God in that situation? And if that's the case, simply begin telling your story. Hey, I went through some hard stuff in my life, and plenty of hard things in my life, and I can think of the times when I was trapped in that sin, or I was in that terrible situation. And I just remember looking back at those times, and just, those were also times where I prayed a lot more, and I really believe that God had helped me through some of these hard times. And if you've experienced the saving God, the God who helps you, and you've experienced it even in your hardship, simply tell your story. Tell it to somebody else. Share it with a neighbor when they're having a hard time, or your children, or a family member. Share the story. There's this line from Pope Paul VI that stands out to me. And he's talking about people who teach the faith. And when we think of teachers of the faith, we think of people who they have this great knowledge of the Bible, and they know their theology, and they've done all this reading and studying and everything. Usually a place where we feel disqualified. But Pope Paul VI said this. He said, "Modern man listens more willingly to witnesses than to teachers. And if he does listen to teachers, it is because they are witnesses." You're going to learn more from somebody who walked the walk, who went through the hard times. You're going to learn from the people who told their story. It's not about knowing all the theology in the world. It's just witnessing to the God who can transform lives. Thanks so much.